I thought I was just a cleaner who couldn't resist tidying up books. Every night in Mr. Davenport's sprawling library, I dusted the shelves and secretly rearranged his collection, leaving little reading suggestions by his chair like literary breadcrumbs. I was convinced no one noticed my midnight librarianship until he called me into his study and uttered the words that made my blood run cold. "I know what you've been doing." In that moment, I thought my life was over. The Davenport estate looked like something out of a Gothic novel. Vast, intimidating, and dripping with wealth most people could never imagine. I'd been working there for 6 months as part of the night cleaning crew, yet every time I stepped through those marble halls, I felt like an intruder. My assigned area was the library, but calling it a library was like calling the ocean a puddle. 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling shelves, rolling ladders, and leather chairs that probably cost more than my car. Mr. Davenport's collection was rumored to hold over 50,000 books. Though without a system, it was literary chaos. I had discovered this on my first night, when I found a cookbook wedged between Nietzsche and Descartes, a romance novel tucked beside Einstein's biography, and first editions of Dickens scattered across different floors as if they had been dropped from the sky. It made my English literature degree ache. 3 years earlier, I'd graduated from a state university with a degree in English Lit and dreams of working in publishing or academia. But dreams didn't pay student loans. I'd sent out dozens of applications to publishing houses, literary agencies, and universities. The responses were always the same. "We've decided to go with another candidate," or worse, no response at all. My savings were vanishing, my rent wasn't waiting, and student loan bills kept arriving. So when my roommate told me her cleaning company was hiring for night shifts, no experience required, good pay, flexible hours, I swallowed my pride and applied. Just temporary, I told myself. That was a year and a half ago. My parents, both blue-collar workers, tried to reassure me. "You're gaining life experience," my mother said during our weekly calls. "Keep reading, keep learning, the right chance will come." Still, every night in that magnificent library, surrounded by more books than most people see in a lifetime, I felt tortured. I wasn't just dusting shelves. I was dusting away my own dreams. I tried to ignore the disarray at first, but the books deserved better. So I started small, grouping Shakespeare together, organizing poetry, creating a contemporary fiction corner that actually made sense. Then I got bolder. Mr. Davenport had a favorite reading chair by the tall windows. I noticed his books changed every few days, covering everything from biographies and science texts to mysteries and literary fiction. One night, I spotted To Kill a Mockingbird in his hands. The next evening, I left Go set a watchman beside his chair, along with a handwritten note. "If you enjoyed revisiting Scout as a child, you may find her as an adult equally compelling, though far more complex. A fellow reader." The book vanished. Encouraged, I kept going. When he read Murakami, I left the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. After a Churchill biography, I recommended The Guns of August. Each time my book disappeared. Slowly, sections of the library began to look organized, as though someone was following the breadcrumbs I left. Gerald Davenport was a legend in the tech world, a man who built an empire worth billions, but a ghost inside his own mansion. In 6 months of working there, I had glimpsed him fewer than 5 times, always from a distance. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through walls and dark hair that looked perpetually mussed from thought. The staff whispered stories about him. He'd once fired a librarian for moving a single book without permission, and made a chef redo an entire dinner party because the salad was served on the wrong plates. He noticed everything, forgave nothing, and yet here I was, secretly rearranging his sanctuary of books, leaving behind my anonymous notes. Each night, as I placed another suggestion by his chair, I braced for the inevitable moment when I'd have to explain myself. But I couldn't stop. The library was too beautiful, too brimming with potential. And the fact that my books kept disappearing? That had to mean something. Sometimes I'd find multiple bookmarks scattered throughout the library, as if Mr. Davenport was juggling several books at once. This wasn't a man who collected volumes for decoration. This was someone who lived with his books, who needed them. One night, I found a notebook beside his chair, filled with handwriting I assumed was his. From the few pages left open, I saw book notes, quotes, scattered reflections. The handwriting was precise but rushed, like someone racing to catch ideas before they vanished. I didn't read further. That felt like a line too far. But the glimpse was enough. For the first time, I felt less like an intruder and more like a silent companion in his literary world. My secret project no longer felt like trespassing. It felt like collaboration. 3 weeks into my unauthorized reorganization, I noticed something that stopped me in my tracks. The books I'd been recommending weren't just disappearing. They were returning to the shelves in deliberate places. The Toni Morrison novel I'd suggested after Baldwin was now tucked neatly beside other African-American literature. Barbara Tuchman's The Guns of August was placed with other narrative histories. This wasn't random. Someone was building a system out of my suggestions. Emboldened, I started leaving longer notes. Instead of just offering titles, I began drawing connections. Between authors, between eras, between themes. When I found him reading 1984, I left Brave New World, with a note about how Orwell and Huxley imagined different but equally chilling dystopias. After a biography of Marie Curie, I suggested The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, writing about science, ethics, and the human cost of discovery. My notes grew more personal. I wasn't just recommending books anymore. I was sharing why they mattered to me. In those scribbles, I was finally having the conversations I'd always longed for, even if they were one-sided. Then came the night that changed everything. Beside his chair was a new notebook, opened deliberately on a page. In the same neat, hurried handwriting were the words, "To my mysterious librarian, your recommendations have been extraordinary. Your insights thoughtful and illuminating. I look forward to discovering what you'll suggest next. Thank you for helping me see my own collection with new eyes." A grateful reader, I froze, my dustcloth clutched in my hand. He knew, he had known all along. But instead of anger, gratitude. For the first time since I'd stepped into that library, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like a collaborator. That night, I left a book and the longest note yet. I recommended The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, writing about the magic of libraries, how books find their readers, and the connections stories can forge between strangers. For the first time, I signed my real name, Caroline. The call came the following Tuesday morning, just as I got home from my shift. "Miss Morgan?" The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Evelyn, Mr. Davenport's personal assistant. He'd like to see you in his study this afternoon." 2:00. Ice water surged through my veins. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mr. Davenport requests your presence at 2. Please use the main entrance, Not the service door I'd been slipping through for months. This was serious. I spent the next 4 hours in a storm of panic. He knew about the books, yes, but what if he'd finally decided I'd crossed a line? What if my last note had been too personal, too presumptuous? I'd left the book thief just the night before, with a reflection on how words outlive destruction. What if that had gone too far? I changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple black dress, neutral enough for either an interview or a funeral. With the way things stood, it could turn out to be either. The Davenport Estate's front entrance was even more imposing than I'd imagined. Marble steps, heavy oak doors, a silent grandeur that pressed against my chest. Evelyn greeted me with kind eyes and led me through sunlit halls I'd only ever seen cloaked in shadows. Every room was filled with art that belonged in a museum, expensive, beautiful, and cold, like a palace no one truly lived in. The study was different. Smaller, warmer, cluttered in a way that suggested someone actually worked there. Paper scattered across a wide desk, 3 pairs of reading glasses, half-finished cups of coffee. And then, him. Gerald Davenport rose from the chair by the window. He was taller up close, with sharp brown eyes that caught everything. For the first time, I noticed how tired he looked, like someone carrying far more than just sleepless nights. "Miss Morgan," he said, his voice steadier, warmer than I expected. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." I perched on the edge of the leather chair, my hands folded in my lap like a student summoned to the headmaster. "I imagine you're wondering why you're here," he said. I think I have an idea." My voice was barely above a whisper. "And I want to apologize. I know I overstepped. I never should have touched your books or left notes. I faltered. I couldn't help myself." He studied me for a long, silent moment. I braced for a lecture on boundaries, maybe even dismissal. Instead, he smiled faintly. "Miss Morgan," he said slowly, "I want to show you something." He picked up a tablet and tapped the screen. My stomach dropped. Of course there were cameras. Of course he'd been watching me. But when he turned the screen toward me, what I saw wasn't raw surveillance footage. It looked edited, crafted, like documentation, not evidence. "I've been watching you reorganize my collection," he said. At first, I was furious. "No one touches my books. I nearly had you fired." I winced, but then I started paying attention. His voice softened. "You weren't just moving things around. You were building something, connections, systems, making the collection breathe again." He gestured toward a neat stack of books on his desk. "Every one of your recommendations. I've read them all. They've been extraordinary." I swallowed hard. I'm sorry. "I know I shouldn't have—" "Stop apologizing," he interrupted firmly. "What you've done here is remarkable. You've taken a collection I merely accumulated and turned it into something alive. And more than that," his eyes locked on mine, "you've introduced me to stories I never would have discovered on my own." He rose from his chair and moved toward the window, his back turned to me. "Can I tell you something, Miss Carter? Something I've never told another soul?" I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I'm going blind." The words struck the air like a thunderclap. My breath caught as he continued, his voice steady but heavy. "It's genetic, degenerative. The doctors warned me 2 years ago, but it's progressing faster than expected. I can still see for now, but the words blur, especially in low light. Within 6 months, reading will be impossible." When Alexander Ward finally turned back, the anguish in his eyes wasn't physical. It was the torment of a man facing the loss of his lifeline. Books have been my escape for as long as I can remember. When I was building the company, fighting through endless boardroom battles and hostile takeovers, I'd come home and read. It kept me sane. It kept me real. He exhaled deeply. When the diagnosis came, I panicked. I started buying books in bulk. Rare first editions, manuscripts, entire collections. I told myself I was preserving them, but really, I was hoarding, surrounding myself with what I was about to lose. He gestured toward the vast library beyond his study. 53,000 books, Miss Carter, and I was drowning in them. They became a monument to my fear, not my love. Then his tone shifted, softer. "But when you came, organizing, annotating, talking to me about them, it changed everything. Your notes weren't just suggestions. They were conversations. For the first time in months, books felt alive again. Not reminders of loss, but friends returning. I finally found my voice. Mr. Ward, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Be curious because I have a proposition." His eyes sharpened with intent. "I want to hire you. Not as a cleaner. As my personal librarian and my reader. Catalog my collection, organize it properly, and more importantly, be my eyes. Read to me. Help me experience literature in a new way." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What? The salary is $150,000 a year. Full benefits. A housing allowance if you'd like to live here on the estate. You'll have complete authority over the library, a budget for acquisitions, and the freedom to design the collection however you see fit." The room seemed to spin. $150,000, more than I'd earned in the last 3 years combined. "You'd trust me with your collection?" "You've already proven yourself," he said firmly. "You've treated my books with more care than I have. You've opened doors I never thought to step through. You reminded me why I fell in love with words in the first place. He slid a folder across the desk. The lawyers drafted the contract. Take it home. Think about it. But I hope you'll say yes. I said yes before I even opened it. 3 weeks later, I stood in what was now my library, overseeing a team of catalogers, managing a new system and wielding a budget that made my head spin. But the true magic came in the afternoons, when the staff left and it was just Alexander and me. I'd never read aloud to another adult, but he listened with a reverence that made every word sacred. He smiled at the voices I gave different characters, asked me to repeat passages that struck him, and debated with me as though literature were oxygen itself. We began with The 7 Lives of Eleanor Grant, a book I knew he'd underestimate but ultimately adore. He admitted, laughing softly, "I never would have picked this up. I would have dismissed it. But you were right. It's brilliant." That became our pattern. I pushed him toward books outside his comfort zone, works that challenged his assumptions and reshaped his perspectives. And we talked about language, structure, identity, truth. The conversations I'd once dreamed of in graduate school were happening daily, in a library more beautiful than anything I had imagined. Alexander was witty, sharp, and endlessly curious. He could recite Shakespeare's sonnets from memory, yet had strong, almost comical opinions on the Oxford comma. One afternoon, after I read aloud a passage from Beloved, he said quietly, "I used to think losing my sight meant losing books forever. But when you read, I hear things I never noticed before, the rhythm, the music, and the discussions afterward. Reading was always solitary for me. This feels like community." Weeks later, he asked softly, "Where did this love of books come from, Clara?" I smiled. My grandmother. She was a librarian in a small Oregon town. Every summer I stayed with her, helping stamp due dates and shelve picture books. At night, she'd make hot chocolate and read Steinbeck, Harper Lee, even Dickens. Later, she asked what I thought, like my opinion mattered. That's when I learned books were conversations with the greatest minds in history. "She sounds remarkable," he murmured. She was. She always said books are like people. Some you love instantly, some take time, and some challenge you in ways that change you forever. 6 months into my role, Alexander surprised me again. "There's a cottage on the estate, unused for years. Fully furnished, private, 5 minutes from the library. If you'd like to move in, I'll adjust your compensation to include housing. It's practical. You'll save time and money. And I think you'd enjoy being closer to the books." The cottage was charming, with wide windows overlooking the gardens and a fireplace that crackled like an old friend. Moving there felt surreal at first, but soon it became home. My student loans finally shrank, my mornings began with birdsong, and my afternoons belonged to literature. But best of all was watching Alexander transform. The shadow in his eyes faded, replaced by excitement, curiosity, and joy. He had a guide dog now, a gentle golden retriever named Homer, and he'd begun attending literary events in the city, embracing his new perspective as a way to experience books more deeply than ever before. "You've changed the way I see literature," Alexander told me one evening after we finished the midnight library. "I thought losing my sight meant losing stories. Instead, it gave me a new way to live inside them." A year later, Alexander made a decision that stunned everyone. He opened his once private library to the public. Every Saturday, the grand doors welcomed students, reading groups, local authors, and families who had never set foot in a place like this. The library, once a monument to fear and solitude, became a sanctuary of learning, laughter, and discovery. I still leave notes by his reading chair. Old habits die hard. But now, they aren't secret scribbles from an unseen cleaner. They're conversations between friends who know that books aren't just ink and paper. They're bridges between generations, between worlds, between people who might never have met without the magic of story. And every afternoon, when I hear Alexander's footsteps and Homer's cheerful panting as they enter the library, I'm reminded that the best stories aren't always the ones bound between covers. Sometimes the best stories are the ones we live, a tale of hidden talents, unexpected connections, and the power of literature to transform lives. So tell me, what book would you recommend to someone trying to fall in love with reading again? Share it in the comments below. If this story of second chances and rediscovering your calling touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep turning pages.